One.
All right, welcome back. We're going to be talking today about Section 2, Chapter 4, dealing with the American Revolution. This comes from the textbook, The Americans. As you can see, the computer has a little bit of a lag going on tonight, so you have to work with us as we make it happen. Okay, Section 2 starts off about ideas help start a revolution. Now, this is confusing to a lot of people. Ideas, how does that start a revolution? Most revolutions are started by ideas and money. And when the two are both present, you're going to have a revolution often. Revolutions don't have to be violent. We learned about the Industrial Revolution in world history, all kinds of revolution, scientific revolution. But in the case of wars, they generally tend to be violent. Another word for the revolution, as I pointed out in the first section, was the American Revolution, the Revolutionary War, the War of Independence. All of these are the same war, so don't get confused with the semantics. After fighting at Lexington and Concord, technically the British saw the colonies as being in a state of rebellion. They'd kill British soldiers and vice versa. So a group called the Second Continental Congress met between May and June in 1775 in Philadelphia. The purpose of this meeting was to debate whether or not they would have independence. Most members at that time wanted to stay part of the British Empire, much like Canada, New Zealand are today. They didn't want a complete break with the mother country. However, other people said, this will never work. Blood's already been shed. We have to go ahead and fight for independence. They took the militia who wanted to be part of a regular army and incorporated them into what we call the Continental Army. Now, this would actually be a group of regulars, not a group of militiamen. And they chose George Washington to be the commander-in-chief of this Continental Army. One of the funny things about it was the main reason he was chosen, besides his military experience, was the fact that he wore his uniform to the Continental Congress pretty much every day, to the point where they got tired of it and said, you know what, go ahead and make him the general. They also decided to do something that was a little controversial. They decided to print paper money to pay the troops. And as you know, the paper money is only as valuable as the government that prints it. And at that point, there was very little banking going on in the New World. We have here a picture from the First Continental Congress, and you have a picture of George Washington as he appeared in the Continental Congress. The Patriots declare independence. During the interim, while the Continental Congress was meeting, an author named Thomas Paine put out a pamphlet called Common Sense. And he basically argued that it made no sense for a small country 3,000 miles away to rule a large expanse of geographic area like the American colonies. And he also talked about how it would allow free trade and foreign aid, and independence would give equal social, economic opportunities to all. Almost 500,000 copies of the pamphlet sold, and this would encourage the colonists to vote for independence or to choose independence. Here's a copy of the actual pamphlet, Common Sense, and to the left you have Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine was an interesting character in that he was considered by most to be very radical. Eventually, Declaration of Independence was written and voted upon. Congress urged each colony to form their own government, and Thomas Jefferson, a Virginia lawyer, along with 4 other men, helped draft the Declaration of Independence. Many of the words in the Declaration of Independence were first coined by John Locke, especially the part about natural rights, which Locke talks about, the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of property. Jefferson changed that to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. But nonetheless, the influence was definitely there. Here's a picture of the actual Declaration of Independence. Not the one handwritten by Jefferson, but one of the ones drafted by the Congress itself. As you can see, people have basic natural rights to life, liberty, and property. People consent to obey a government that protects those rights. All men are created equal means free citizens are political equals. Now, at this time, it did not mean women and it did not mean African Americans. Thankfully, and eventually, women, African Americans, and all races and creeds would be included in the meaning of the statement. The actual declaration was adopted on July 4th, 1776, even though it had been approved 2 days earlier. Immediately, the Americans began to choose sides. At the start of the conflict, most people say only 35 to 45% of all Americans favored independence. 30% were loyalists, and the rest didn't really care. The loyalists, however, opposed independence and stayed loyal to the crown for different reasons. Some of them worked in the government. Others were unaware of the events going on and trusted the crown to protect their rights. However, the patriots, the textbook says approximately half the population, I said 45%, support independence and think independence will mean economic opportunity. Other groups were also divided. Quakers, African Americans, and Native Americans were on both sides, but the Native Americans, for the most part, supported the British. That concludes Section 2, Chapter 4 of the American Textbook Lecture Series.